Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. This is indeed a great day for the USA. This is a great day for the nation, and this is a great day for the state of Georgia. I am Pastor Sabrina McKenzie, the founder and the executive director for the National Task Force Against Domestic Violence. And the task force began and was started because we found that there was a gap between nonprofit larger agencies and the smaller grassroots agencies, whereas the larger nonprofits had the resources and the finances to really make things happen on behalf of victims, but the grassroots agencies were actually the boots on the ground where they were touching the lives of women and children every day. However, they lacked the capacity or the finances or the depth to really impact the families in terms of them having the ability to have stay, them having the ability to go to court proceedings or knowing what court proceedings or knowing the law. So what we decided to do as the task force is be a bridge and to bring those two things together, Kim and Representative Mitchell, and to bring those two agencies together, the grassroots as well as the larger nonprofits. So when you have the National Task Force, that's what you see is a collaboration between the grassroots and the larger nonprofit agencies. In doing such, our goal is to impact the seven spheres of influence, which are family, government, religion, arts, media, entertainment, and business. So come in, please. So in impacting those seven spheres of influence, we want to make sure that we provide the initiatives that we came up with as a task force. And that is first to be proactive, to make certain that we are educating and training the community on things they need and the information they need regarding domestic violence, as well as that we have laws in place that protect the victims. You know, today we are all here because of Marissa Alexander, and the theme of it is to stop blaming the victims. What we've noticed across the nation is that the person that has been prosecuted or the person that has been convicted has constitutional rights. However, the victim has only statute rights, particularly in the state of Georgia. And we want to make sure nationwide, especially because we're based here in Georgia, that across the board that the victims have rights and that we stop blaming the victims for being victimized. So if you're in trouble or if you're having a challenge, it is unfair, it is unconstitutional to then, when you come forward, to throw you in prison or to say we don't care about you or to say it's your fault because of the way you dress, it's your fault because of how you look, it's your fault because they hit you, it's always your fault. Well, we are standing here today as a task force to say it is not her fault. It is not his fault. If you are being abused, it is not your fault, and we're standing on your behalf. We also, as a task force, have an initiative to make certain that notification is being given to all the people that have been victimized. What does that look like? There is a young lady by the name of Bridget Flowers, who in Macon, Georgia, she was abused by her husband in a Walmart. After she was abused by him, he was let out of prison the following day on a technicality. 8 days later, she had never received notification that this man was out of jail. 8 days later, he murdered her while she was with her children inside of the car. He shot up the car, could have killed the kids. Her daughter had to move the body, the dead body, out of the way and to drive her mother away from this man as her mother was bleeding. So had this young lady, had this mother received notification, maybe today Bridget Flowers would be living. When they asked the DA why was Ms. Flowers and her family not notified, she simply said, well, it takes 30 days for notification to be given to the family. In 30 days, in 8 days, Bridget Flowers was dead. So one of our goals as a task force is to make certain that there is a notification system throughout the USA, but particularly right now we're fighting in the state of Georgia to make certain that the notification that is given is universal, because what we've realized is that there are better services in the metropolitan area than in the areas such as Macon and the other outskirts, Augusta, who may not have the same privileges and the same benefits as all of the resources that we do in Atlanta. So those are the things that we're going to be fighting for, and those are the things that we are standing for as a domestic violence task force. Right now, the person that made today possible at the Capitol is Representative Billy Mitchell, and he has been so kind to work with us. We're advocating on behalf of Marsy's Law, which is a victim's bill of rights. And as I mentioned earlier, Marsy's Law simply gives the victim constitutional rights, whereas right now in the state of Georgia, the victim only has statute rights. Representative Mitchell was so touched by Marissa Alexander's story that he decided to release legislation on behalf of the victim, so that when they are in court, we're not looking at the victim as if she is the one who committed the crime. And we're happy and elated that he is not only a part of the task force, but working diligently and working daily and working hard to make certain that the victim's rights are protected. Please receive Representative Billy Mitchell.
Glad to have you all here for this important issue, for sure. I want to also take this time out to thank Ms. Alexander for being here. Certainly, the arduous circumstances which brings you here have since discovered that had your ordeal happened in this state, that would not have been the case. Florida was the first state to enact a stand your ground law. Georgia was soon after. But believe it or not, Georgia's stand your ground provision is much more stringent than Florida. Immediately having someone come to your home, as we call it, the Castle Doctrine, Attorney Griggs in the law, you would have been protected. But nonetheless, we do have some deficiencies in law. While I suggest that the Marsy's Law is so very important, and so glad to have you and all these other advocates that are here at the Capitol, making sure that your voice is being aired in support of that initiative. I think everything that needed to be said has been said, other than we certainly need to make sure that we have folks informed about this issue. I think very oftentimes in law, we have these kinds of situations where we have so many folks that are just not informed enough about the issues before us. A constituent of mine presented a very similar issue, in that this particular individual that assaulted her was actually up for parole and was given hearings and was given opportunities to tell his side of the story in an effort to free himself, but the family was never given the same courtesy. And I believe that needs to stop, and we need to address that in law, which I am prepared to do so. Other than that, Pastor Sabrina, I'm ready to take any questions if there are any. But once again, I'd like to welcome you here, and hopefully, as a result of your ordeal, we'll have few, if any, others that have to go through the same circumstance.
Awesome. So we have 2 speakers left. If you would hold your question. You got to go? Right?
No,
Do you have
good.
to go?
I'm good for
He's on the clock. Are you?
Okay, I'm good for a while. Okay.
He's doing the people's business. So anytime you feel like we need to you want to take those questions, let me know. We'll shift.
Okay. Today is bill signing day for the governor, so that's what we have. But I'm good.
Any questions specifically for Representative Mitchell?
I'm going to get your other speakers too. I don't want to.
Okay. We have no questions for you.
This is an informed and media here. No fake news here for sure.
No alternative facts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did Ms. Alexander get an opportunity to speak?
No, she's going to speak right now. I was going to
right.
introduce her. Is that okay? You want to introduce her, sir?
No.
Okay. So we, again, are happy that Marissa's in town. Marissa Alexander is actually from the state of Florida. and has been fighting very hard ever since this happened to her. I want to let you know that initially when it happened to her, she had just given birth 8 days prior to going through one of the worst ordeals of her life. So to still be standing strong and fighting, we are happy to have her here in Georgia, but she's not just here to represent victims, the state of Georgia, but she's representing women across this nation. The strong, vivacious, talented, gifted, please receive the warrior, Marissa Alexander.
I want to thank you all for inviting me to your city. Thank you, Billy, Representative Mitchell. Thank you, Sabrina, Rhonda. This has been a really great experience. This has been amazing that I can come and support Georgia's National Domestic Task Force. One of the things that she mentioned a lot, it got played down in the news, is that I did just have giving birth, and my daughter was premature. She was 5 pounds, 12 ounces, so while I was at home fighting for my life, she was in the ICU fighting for hers. And under these circumstances, to have to make a decision to, not, to basically preserve your life was life-altering. In the theme of blaming the victim, I essentially made a decision, and I believe, and I stand by that decision. I am for protecting yourself, and as a result, was prosecuted for doing so. And so many victims have survived and been punished. Today, I just want to talk about just in epidemic proportions, the amount of victims that are currently this law would essentially help, as well as the things that, they mentioned different stories. So out of Sanford, Florida, was a young lady who had an issue, a domestic violence issue with her mate, and he had a record as well. And she called the police not once but twice. They did come out to intervene, but had due diligence would have been done as to look in his car to see that he had a weapon, and he should not have had one. And follow back to the home and made sure that he either was at that point taken into, based on the situation that was happening at that time, perhaps she would have been alive. He had her keys to her home, and this was all on body cam in Sanford, Florida. And I'd like to say that because she had no way of really exiting in terms of getting in a vehicle and leaving, she had to go to the bus with her mother because she knew this man was going to come back. And essentially, he knew what bus station they was going to be in, and he shot them up. He shot a child. Another person at bus stop got shot, and she was killed. These are the type of things that are happening at epidemic proportions. In Jacksonville, Florida, there are 48 homicides just as of now, and 11 of them are from domestic violence situations. I support Marcy's Law because it's important to understand that when a victim is trying to exit an abusive situation, it is the most vulnerable time for them to be able to get out. You cannot say to your abuser, hey, I'm getting ready to go, and you have a nice life. It does not work like that. And so what happens is this law that they're proposing is just, to me, an easy fix to do. It may not fix everything, because we know that it won't, but it's a step in the right direction so that victims have just a little bit more time and space and rights to be able to exit the relationship. And so for me in Florida, we have Vine. When he was arrested, there was a PIN number given to me so that I was able to know when he actually posted bond. That's important because at that point, he then had to come back to the home that we were living in to retrieve his items. So then I knew I needed to get police escorts involved, and those things make a difference in actually saving somebody's life. It's very important that we understand prevention. We talk a lot about victims needing to exit. We talk a lot about them needing to leave, and those are very important. But we also need to be able to discuss with them what healthy relationship look like and be able to identify when somebody is an abusive profile. That education is very important. I see a lot of literature about what you can do for them to exit, which, like I said, is important. But it's also important that when a woman or an intimate partner get together, that what they understand is that this is a situation where this person is controlling and they're abusive, and look for those signs. And when you identify those signs and understand what a dysfunctional and healthy relationship is like, that you then decide this is not the place that I need to be. It's very difficult when a woman depends on a man from a social, an economic standpoint, And it's important that people know that this is not, and we've heard the term say before, but I was working at a company, a payroll company, a major payroll company for 10 years. My undergrad is in information technology, and most people even know I had a master's degree. I was a manager, and I had 15 direct reports. And I, was really good at what I did, and this happened to me. So know that this is not a poverty-based issue. This is not a race-based issue. This is an actual very serious issue for all humanity. And to make a choice to pass this law, not to look at accountability, from what I understand, the argument is that we don't want to be accountable for if the person is not reached. There's hurdles that can be put in place, mechanisms that put in place to mitigate those barriers, so that it's not about placing blame or accountability. It's about preserving human costs. You're talking about lives. Okay, so that's something to really be considered when this law is actually passed through the Senate, and that the House would, I hope, actually look into. It's a step in the right direction. So that's pretty much what I have to say. I thank you for opening this up, and if you have any questions, I guess.
Awesome.
Two questions. Give us an update on the baby.
Okay.
And I'm very interested in that. I actually spoke to your attorney when you were in prison and wrote you a letter. I was so moved by so it's wonderful to see you out.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And
Thank you.
What date did you get out?
Okay. So this essentially, he obtained custody through a restraining order. She was 6 months old. From that point, he kept her away from my family and myself. I had no way of knowing where she was or who she was with. I did not see my daughter Rihanna until she was 3 years old, and I had been sentenced to prison. And at that point, a family member brought her to come and see me. So now, the first order of business for me when I got out was to get visitation, as I was starting to go back to trial. And I did obtain visitation. And so now we're divorced and we have shared custody. We are in a love fest. I love her. She knows her mommy. And it's amazing because I wrote journals about, I wonder if I'm going to be able to see her and if she knows me. And now she does, and she knows that I'm her mommy. So we're doing good. She's getting ready to be 7. I did 2 years of community home detention. And in those 2 years, I wanted to be productive. I didn't want to be bitter. I wanted to be able to do exactly what I'm doing here today, support other coalitions and task forces in this major issue. So that's a part of what my nonprofit, Marissa Alexander Justice Project, is about. I got off of the House ankle monitor on January 27th of this year, and I hit the ground running, and I have not stopped, and I won't stop, so.
And one more question. What can we do, just individuals, to help? I know you have the legislation that you're pursuing and all that, and that's on a grand scale, a large scale. But as a regular neighbor, relative, what can we do to help domestic violence stop?
One of the things that I have noticed is that when I'm speaking even to my male friends is to also understand what it is that they have a side of it as well, to understand where it is going on with you. It's just having the conversation. It's seeing somebody and realizing that they're explaining to you somebody they're with, and you can see the signs, and that's not a healthy thing. It's about being in the community, and if you actually see somebody committing some infraction against somebody, it's not saying I'm gonna turn another cheek, it's not my business, and to stop snitching. Somebody's gonna lose their life, and it could be your family member. You understand what I'm saying? So those are just some of the things in support. Know what legislation is being brought up. Educate yourself on those things, and then talk to your representatives, because they essentially work for you. And so you absolutely want to be able to engage with them about the things that are affecting your community, and then stay on top of that.
I guess I'll ask you a question. I want to go back and look at your face. What has kept you during this time? Looking at gentlemen, looking at Trayvon, looking at your confinement, knowing that it was not right. Tell me about your face.
You have to understand that when you're in a situation where you are in the fight of your life, and you don't have any influence, money, power, or anything, and you are facing 20 years, day for day, no gain time. This is day for day. You have to rely on a higher power than yourself, and I just like to call him God. And so there is absolutely no way that I would have been able to get through this had I not had a relationship. And I didn't go, I mean, I've always been brought up in the church, but it's a whole nother thing to have a relationship with somebody that you can lean on. There was days when I asked God to not let my hand go because I could not hold on any longer. It was very difficult. And so I had to absorb myself in things that were positive and that it created light. I couldn't absorb myself. I could not be angry. It was a useless emotion. It was not going to be helpful. It was going to deteriorate my spirit, and then I could not, continue to fight. So faith absolutely is what I leaned on, and I still do.
Questions for Marissa? Okay, great. Awesome. And Marissa, you so articulately expressed all of our sentiments. We thank God for you, and we call him God too. Yes. And so that is just quite all right. I oftentimes tell people, you don't choose your calling, but your calling chooses you. And after hearing you speak, we're clear that you were chosen for this particular task. And we thank God it was you, because you're able to really express what a lot of women who have been voiceless and helpless and marginalized are not able to express. So we thank you. I want to say as well that the law sometimes can be used to help you, and we know, especially for those that are African American, the law can be used against you. In Florida, there was a particular minimum sentence. If you're carrying a gun, it's 10 years. If you fire it, it's 20 years. If you murder somebody, it's life. That particular law was the reason that Marissa's penalty was so great. And so we really, when we're speaking of legislation and the law, it's imperative that we understand even the stand your ground that was used in Trayvon Martin case to make certain that the person that was prosecuted was not confined. However, a person who there was a known PTO on the record, 3 times of abuse. The man went into the jail and told them that he threatened her. And still, because of their very minimum, they gave this woman 20 years. So we have to be very clear on the law and make sure that we are working with the members of government, the members of state, in House and Senate. As Marissa said, they work for us to make sure that we know the law and that we're working to change the law so that the victims are not victimized. At this time, I mentioned that there are several agencies. It's a collaboration at the National Task Force Against Domestic Violence. And there's several agencies that have partnered with us. The Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Latinos Against Domestic Violence Still Standing organization is working with us. There are a slew of organizations, but one of them is, or actually 3 of them are here, and one of them is about to speak to you on today. So at this time, I want to present to you Rhonda Thompson, who actually was one of the reasons Marissa is here today in Atlanta. Please receive her.
Thank you, Pastor Sabrina. So I'm not going to be before you long because Marissa said everything I had to say. I just kept smiling. But one thing I want to address is our organization is Rose of Sharon, which is a grassroots organization that partnered with the coalition and as well as the National Task Force Against Domestic Violence, which we are very grateful for. But the face of a victim, oftentimes, Marissa did mention it, that, we think there's a correlation to their economic status or their education, and sometimes that's true, but they look just like you and I. They are master degrees, PhDs, they're CEOs, they're attorneys. Matter of fact, one of my first board members was an attorney. They look just like you and I. And one of the questions that are asked often is, why do the victims stay? That is a very judgmental question to ask a victim. Oftentimes, you have to have a calculated escape plan, and there's no one size fit all. I had a, I had a, okay, I had a client who did leave. She did not tell her abuser where she was, and he found out where she lived. And during that time, he broke in her house, knocked the door down, and then took the wood off of the door and proceeded to beat her with it. Just this past week, I was contacted by the DA in that case that I would be needed to go to court on her behalf because he did not take the plea that was offered to him. And at the last minute, he took the plea. He was facing 8 years and ended up with 1. So we do have some things, and my concern was, no, he didn't steal anything, but isn't that burglary or breaking and entering? Doesn't that hold, some type of weight if we even just remove the domestic violence? So to say to a woman, why don't she leave, and not really know the full picture is very hardening. Leave and go where? Where can she go? Can she go to her family house where he knows everywhere her family lives? Can she go to her friend's house? Oftentimes she doesn't have that outlet, and it may mean leaving the state. Sometimes a temporary protection order is just a piece of paper and it won't hold them back either. So my thing to the community is just be careful as we have these conversations. We want to make it a safe place for women to come and share with us if they're in trouble. And oftentimes, it may not be a stranger. It could be somebody you know that you live with, that you have gone to school with, that you've worked with. And she does not have anyone else to talk to. And because she's close to you, she will share with you what's going on. So please don't ask, why didn't you leave? Help her by finding a way to leave.
Awesome. The National Task Force has partnered with 2 initiatives to make certain that we do a better job at serving victims and making sure that their voices are heard. One of those organizations, you heard Marissa express about the VINE system. And again, that system clearly makes certain that notification is given to the victim on when he's leaving, what he's doing, every movement that he makes, as well as it allows them an opportunity to participate in court proceedings. That's important when you're a victim because you want to be able to monitor where that person is. The second initiative, which I'm so elated to have the state director, Ann Casas, with us today, is Marsy's Law. And it's imperative that the victims have a voice, especially those that have been murdered. If they're murdered and they're no longer here, that means that who is standing or speaking on their behalf? And I believe Marsy's Law represents the voice of the victim crying from the grave. So I want you to receive today the state director of Marsy's Law, Ann Casas.
Whenever we talk about legislation, a lot of times our eyes kind of glaze over because it's not an exciting subject to talk about. But every piece of legislation is inspired by people that have issues that need to be resolved. Marcy Nicholas was a 21-year-old college student, and she broke up with her boyfriend, and he threatened that he was going to kill himself. So she went to console him and try to stop him, and when she walked through the door, he shot and killed her. So much like Marissa, Marcy was a victim of domestic violence, and her story did not end as well as Marissa's has ended, thank God. But Marcy's family was not afforded a lot of rights and protections when they were going through the court process. They weren't told that the boyfriend got out on bond, and they ran into him in a grocery store. He proceeded to do a lot of things to their family while he was out, and when he was brought up on, and many times in the court hearings and different proceedings, they were not given a seat in the courtroom. So they were kept out of that process. And as you see, just like with Marissa, a lot of times victims are amazing people because out of their pain, they don't want the same thing to happen to other people. And so they sow in tears, in essence. They want to change things so that the same thing that happened to them doesn't happen to other people. So Dr. Henry Nicholas is one of those people that's doing that, just that. He is Marcy's brother. And what happened to them in California, he did not want to happen to people in other states. So Marcy's Law has been on a mission to go into every state that does not have constitutional protections or that has weak statutes or constitutional protections, and to strengthen those so that a victim can have stronger rights in court. Right now, Georgia is, there are 35 states that have constitutional rights and protections for their crime victims, but Georgia does not. We are one of 15 states that does not have constitutional protections. What does that mean? That means when you go into court as a victim, the accused or the criminal has more rights than you do. They have enforceable constitutional rights. They can enforce their rights. But in Georgia, you only have statutory rights. So if your rights are violated, you cannot enforce them. You have no influence, like Marissa said. You have no ability. You are at the mercy of the court. But with Marcy's Law, you will be able to appeal those decisions to a judge. A judge will be able to arbitrate. They will be able to balance equally the victim's rights and the criminal's rights. They will be able to make a decision on that. So what we want is for the victim, as far as Marcy's Law legislation, is to be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect throughout the court process, to receive notification at every step throughout the whole court process, and the ability to enforce their rights if their rights are violated. Those are just common sense rights that are already in our statute, but they're not enforceable right now, and that's what we want. Basically, we want to change the framework. When a victim enters into the courtroom, whenever someone's victimized, we want them from the get-go to have the same level of respect and consideration as the accused or the criminal does. We're well on our way to doing that. Senator John Kennedy of Macon, where Bridget Flowers was from, and thanks to Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle and representatives like Billy Mitchell and others, we were able to pass through the Senate, and with Representative Billy Mitchell's help and others in the State House, we will pass through the State House next year and be on the 2018 ballot so the voters of Georgia can decide. Thank you. You know, crime victims' rights is not a partisan issue. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat or what color skin you have, or if you're male or female or poor or rich, you can be a victim. And I love a quote that President Ronald Reagan had, and he's the one who initiated in the 1980s the pursuit of victims' rights. And he said, for far too long, the victim of crime has been the forgotten person in our criminal justice system. And I know that President Bill Clinton also, when he was in office, pushed for stronger constitutional rights for crime victims. So what we do is we're asking for the citizens of Georgia to stand alongside of us and write to your representatives and ask for crime victims to have stronger rights. We believe that no rapist should have more rights than the person that they raped, and that no abuser should have more rights than the person they abused. So please join Marcy's Law and help us give a stronger voice to crime victims in Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you. In closing, I just want to say on behalf of the National Task Force Against Domestic Violence, we really are making a plea to the community, a plea to the church, a plea to all of you who are listening to the sounds of our voice. Domestic violence is not just a Georgia issue. Domestic violence is a nation's issue. And 3 out of 5 women in a lifetime will be affected or impacted by domestic violence. Every 9 seconds, a woman is abused. And $8.3 billion, I want you to say that with me, $billion.
$billion.
Is being spent on hospital visits from women, primarily women, who are being treated because of domestic violence abuse. So please stand with us for this legislation of Marcy's Law, and as we continue to fight on behalf of not just Georgia, but women as a whole, or I would even go further to say victims. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, I do. I've been asking for help for 10 years. I've been traumatized since my Ford truck burnt up our house and we were displaced. And a lot of women end up in domestic violence situations, not only with your spouse, but with your family. Your entire family can be violent, and that's why you may end up with a violent individual. And they don't really have nice, decent homes. jobs, a real good, secure support system. Like if something happens and you have to be displaced, black women don't get treated real well. We don't get those big settlements that white people do, like you see on Fox News. We do not look out for each other, and we give all our money to these big churches, and we don't.
My.
So who and where can we go? Because we go to the meetings, it's overcrowded, women just overflowing. Georgia's number one, we get shot, and I was the one that really kept Marissa's, I never met her, but I want to meet her before she leaves. After Trayvon got shot, we kept her case out there before Reverend L. Every congressman, President Obama, Michelle Obama, when he got shot, we found out that prosecutor was the same one to give her 20 years. And we asked her for help right here. We don't get any help, but we kept that case before everybody, Jesse Jackson, every congressman, and thank God she's here, so I want to meet her before she leaves.
Absolutely. So her question was loaded, but but I do.
Because we don't have protected conversations on social media. We don't have no privacy.
Right.
They use that against us just for being in a situation.
Right, and I want to apologize on behalf of the church and many of the leadership that you don't have the resources or the access that should be available. And it's one of the reasons for those of us that are in the grassroots area of domestic violence. All of us have been impacted by domestic violence personally. So we're not standing here talking at you. We're standing here talking with you because we experience ourselves the same thing. And it's the reason that the task force was created. So I do want to speak to you once we're done because we want to help you provide some of those sources. The other thing is Georgia ranks, I believe it's 8 in the nation. No, it's number 8 in the nation. I'm going to introduce her. It's number 8 in the nation. So out of all the states that we have, Georgia is number 8. That's a very high number. You also mentioned in terms of the resources that are available or impacting African American women. African American women, when you say number 8, specifically are at the highest of the totem pole as it relates to domestic violence. And statistics have proven that much of that is because of the lack of jobs, the lack of housing, the lack of education in some areas. So anytime you have impoverished areas, you're going to find more domestic violence cases. However, it doesn't negate, as it's been stated several times, domestic violence knows no boundary, knows no race, knows no economic status, knows no gender. Domestic violence can happen anywhere, but it is happening in the African American community far greater than anywhere else. Thirdly, we have with us the political director from the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and we're so happy that she's here. But I want her to specifically give you some of the stats. I was a very good student, and I brought with me the fatality review. This fatality review is specifically for Georgia, and I want you to give some of the stats that are listed inside of it.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sheena Morris. I am the Director of Policy and Community Engagement at the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We do have a public policy director as well. Her name is Allison Smith Burke, and she and I together work around some of the legislative issues that are faced here in Georgia. Just to put a little context onto what Pastor McKenzie has shared, Georgia does rank 8th in the nation for the rate at which men murder women. That information comes directly from the Violence Policy Center report. For many years in that report, as Pastor McKenzie mentioned, African American women have been the population of victims that have been impacted the most here in the state of Georgia. So the population is around 33% of African American women, but the domestic violence related fatalities that have occurred over the course of that report's findings have been around 50 or 60%. I'm not recalling the exact number, but the rate has been higher. There has been a disproportionate impact on African American women. As was mentioned, the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, in partnership or collaboration with the Georgia Commission on Family Violence, actually releases an annual fatality review report annually. This is the 13th annual report. This year's report actually highlighted a good bit of information around the connection to domestic violence and suicide. We have seen that there is a link between those two things, which then also brings other things into question or to play, such as mental health, other things, so on and so forth. We actually do have our project manager here with us today for the fatality review report. So if there are specific questions around statistics, they may be directed to Taylor Tab.
Thank you. Any questions at this time?
I just want to make a statement. This report, if you want it, you can go to the coalition's website. It's free, so everybody can obtain them. They'll mail you one, but you can also download a PDF of it.
So that website is www.gcadv.org. And the report is available there. Also, one thing that I did forget to mention around some of the coalition's work, that we are being proactive about addressing the issue of domestic violence in the African American community. We have worked with several of the organizations up here to host what is called community conversations in the Black and African American community that are specifically talking about what are the needs of survivors and victims in the African American community. How can we improve or work with our partners to improve systems responses as they respond to victims in the community. So that is one of the initiatives that we have taken on over the past year and have already received great feedback from the community as to how greater assistance can be provided. And what we are doing with that information is utilizing it to train service providers so that they do know how to have a better or more adequate response.
Any questions? Yes.
Good morning, ladies.
Morning.
And thank you, Pastor Sabrina and Rhonda, for
Don't you
always
leave.
inviting to Inform Magazine. So, Rhonda, you spoke a little bit earlier about, and Marissa also talked about it, about the being preventive and looking for the signs. Can we just talk about some of the signs that either as a person someone looking on or someone in a relationship can just look for immediately? Anyone can answer that question, just so our viewers will know what are some of those signs that we can look for early.
You want to?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Some of the simple signs is one of them I would say is that gut feeling when you feel that someone is trying to control you. That's the underlining factor of domestic violence, is one's ability to control you. So when you get in a situation with your intimate partner, and as it was stated earlier, it can be a family member, and you feel like you have to walk on eggshells. If you say the wrong thing, you know, the conversation is not just going to be an argument. It's going to be so aggressive that you're fearful. Those are just some very simple things. And then we go on to name calling and pushing and shoving and controlling the finances, so you're not able to move around as easily. And if you don't report a text message or phone call within a certain amount of time, you're going to get it. You're going to get yelled at. It just starts out with that first. It doesn't automatically go into hitting. And then after a while, you're so low and so dependent on this person that then the hitting starts, and then it escalates from there. Something else I want to say about, I said earlier, we talk about a victim leaving. Oftentimes, and we've learned in the statistics that that is the most crucial time when she can lose her life. So that's why I mentioned earlier about having a calculated escape plan to get out and to be able to make it comfortable as our community, make it comfortable for us to have those discussions with you, because we don't necessarily know that there's a Rose of Sharon or that there's a Still Standing Foundation or the Georgia Coalition that'll help us. We just know we're in something and don't know how to get out of it, and we're being judged when we talk about it.
Did you see that young lady when you're done?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we told her we was going to meet with her.
And I'm sorry, and so secondly, I know that you all, most of you there are some type of overcomers in a way, and I know that faith has gotten you through a lot, but tell me about some self-care thereafter. I know that we can pray, but is there professional help that needs to be sought?
Well, I'll speak for myself. For me, when I was incarcerated, prior to afterward, my life was completely upside down, and I was on autopilot. And so as a mother, I had to care for my newborn and then my twins. They were 10 at the time. So I did seek some help because I actually didn't even realize that I was in an abusive relationship. I really categorized it as somebody who just had an anger management issue. So once I went to see her, she gave me a book to read, and then I was like, okay, now that's exactly what this looks like. And now I understand it as a profile, and this is what they do. So as far as self-care, what I have done is I journal, for one. And another thing that I do is I work out. I work out religiously. I enjoy it. It makes me feel good, and it's a way for me to kind of release, and the writing is cathartic. And so those are just some of the things that I do. And I believe that, for some other, seeking help is also a good thing.
Yes.
A good somebody that you can rely on, but also something that's specifically for your enrichment that you like to do, that it allows for that energy to flow out, whether it be knitting or, I don't know, golfing, whatever you like to do. That's what I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to piggyback off of what Marissa just said, because a lot of times when people are in those situations, they don't realize that they're being domestically abused, especially when they're not being hit. And domestic violence goes beyond just somebody beating on you. So getting counseling is essential. I know it's a taboo in certain communities, but getting counseling is essential. And I will say this, one time going to visit a counselor, you're always trying to figure out when is the perfect time to leave. When I get my money together, when I'm finished school, when my kids turn 18. And the lady looked at me and she said, you can wait for the perfect time or you can leave in a body bag.
Well, how do you follow up behind that? I tell you. I just wanted to mention some of the specific resources that are present here in Georgia around providing self-care. So there is an organization called Makash Healing Network who provides resources around like culinary arts, hip-hop therapy, journaling, financial empowerment, because again, to Pastor McKenzie's point, often the thoughts around receiving formalized therapy is very stigmatized, particularly when you talk about specific communities such as African American community. So there are organizations such as this who have found a very creative way in fostering healing and doing it from a place of cultural specificity in addressing one's wholeness in their healing. MACOSH Healing Network. Another one that has been very good about being very creative in how they do healing with survivors has been Rose of Sharon. So there are a number of community-based organizations that are out here really being innovative in how they're reaching survivors.
Can you give us your name and telephone?
My name is Sheena Morris, and I am with the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Any last questions? This is the final questions. Come.
What can we do to get more funds, set up a GoFundMe page or something, because women in Georgia has shut down the entire office in Georgia, in the capital, as far as helping women of domestic violence. The violence don't have to be with the man, it could be with your mother. We got kids to get beat down, we got grown people that gotta take care of their parents, and the parents can be extremely abusive when you got to give up your career, come back home and take care of your parents. And we don't have any resources, so like Planned Parenthood had a lot of resources.
Uh-huh.
How can domestic violence, as, I don't know, an organization, have better resources?
I'm glad you asked that. And that's the reason that the National Task Force Against Domestic Violence was formulated, because we saw that there was a lack of disparity of resources being disseminated into the community. So we put together the police department, many members of the House of Representatives are on that committee. We want you to be on that committee. Many of the grassroots are on that committee. And also, I would be remiss, Zane is here. She is a famous author and has done several movies, has directed. But the reason that I point her out is because she's a part of the arts and entertainment that we discussed. And some of the funding, some of the help, when we talk about a reach, if she sends out a tweet, it hits over 1 million people. We need the community of arts and entertainment, the celebrities, to assist with funneling money, helping with resources, and helping us to really get education out to a people who may only understand it from the things that you write and the things that you do. So we are working on that. The task force is only 3 months. Bear with us. Now, the people that have been here, I have no excuse for them. But we will do our part to get you the help that you need. And now that we're all here today, we will make certain that we pull you to the side and assist you with some of that. But it's not just you. We want to be able to help the women. Listen, there's been 1,000 women last year reported just from Georgia alone who could not find housing. How many women did not make that report? So that's why we're here. We're going to make sure that we helped you. Please receive Tamika Lowry with, come on, Tamika, I've seen you.
Good morning,
Still
everyone.
standing.
I'm Tamika Lori Pugh, founder and executive director of the Still Standing Foundation. We actually focus on the educational piece of domestic violence, educating the community, high schools, corporations, and churches. But I just wanted to really piggyback really quick when we talk about the signs. One of the things we want to keep in mind is isolation is a huge sign of domestic violence. Sometimes you think that that person is isolating you or keeping you away from people because they care about you or they care about your well-being, but that's a form of control. And when you get ready to leave that relationship, you don't have anyone to reach out to because you've been isolated all that time. So think about isolation. And then when we talk about healing, of course we want to do the counseling and therapy and things of that nature, but also don't forget to forgive. Give yourself permission to forgive, not only that person that abused you, but you have to forgive yourself. Because what happens is we walk around bitter and we're angry and we don't love ourselves anymore. And so now you have this whole lack of self-love coming into place. But give yourself permission to forgive yourself because your future depends on it.
Thank you. So, if there are no other questions, I wanted to turn the mic over to Marissa to give us a closing thought for today. You are the lady of the hour, and we're grateful that you're here, and we're grateful that you're out.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I just want to say again, thank you for you all coming and covering this. It's a very important issue, and thank all of the people in the organization. There's a lot of people out there that are doing the work. One of the things that I also would recommend, I think the lady asked about what could be done. Actually, I would suggest to you, you can go, I know in our courts, you can actually go and sit in the courtroom, go in there and see what it's like. Go in there and see what the cases are like, see what the system is like. It's very informative. I went and sat in some domestic violence protective order hearings. I knew immediately who the abuser was and who was being antagonized. I could see it. There was an organization, which I will not name, that was there, but they could not provide the services to the person who was deemed as the person that was responded, even though the person who actually filed it was using it as a form of control, which is abuse. And because of that conflict of interest, these women had nowhere to go with their kids, and that's a problem. So I would suggest that you do get involved in that. I also sat in some delinquent hearings with our children. Major issue. That's our future. That's our next generation. And so with that said, I think this is just, these things need to continue to happen. Good questions like this lady over here asked. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, we need to reevaluate things. There's differences. Difference doesn't mean it has to be divisive, just means they're different. And so we can reach what I can reach with a different way. Maybe somebody else like Sabrina or even Anna can reach another group of people, but it doesn't matter how they reach as long as we meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just very, very serious about that because it's such a huge disconnect and there's such a divisiveness, and it doesn't need to be. It's a human cost. It's a humanitarian issues that we're working on here. So continue to support this national task force, and I will too. From whatever state that anybody needs me to go to, I'll come.
Thank you.